Okay guys, so in our last video, we created our register endpoint. This video, we're going to create the login endpoint. So you'll actually be able to log in with that new user you created or any of the other existing users. I mentioned the password last time for those existing users. They're all the same, even though the hash looks different, which is exactly what we want. And that password is just in the Pokedex API repository on GitHub in the README file at the bottom. Okay, so let's go ahead. I'm just going to collapse that, make it easier. And I'm going to add a new endpoint. Again, this is a post endpoint because we're creating data. So with the register endpoint, we created a new user. With this one, we're going to be creating a new token. And so we'll just call this login. Login, do rec, res. Don't think we need next on this one either, since this is the last stop, the end of the line. First things first is we're going to find the trainer that is trying to log in. So we'll do await models.trainer.find one. We don't need to find all because there should only be one with the given username or email. So we're going to allow them to log in with either their username or their email address. So create a where object, which is going to be what we're filtering on. And then we're also going to do set raw equal to true. What this means is when we get data back from SQLize, there's usually a lot of extra data that can be useful sometimes, but for us, we don't want that extra data. We just want the data that's stored in the database. So that's what raw, setting raw to true does. Then in the where object, we're going to use a symbol op and is what we're going to do. And then we're going to have an object. So what we're going to do is we're going to have another filter in here, and every field that we're filtering on is going to be anded together. So we're going to say, make sure email is, so we're going to be checking the email they sent in the body, and we're also going to be checking the username. Now you might ask, well, won't this just check both of those? So they actually have to send both of those. As we've written it, yes, that is exactly what will happen. So we're going to change it a bit. I'm just going to add this. We're going to do a ternary in here, rec.body.email. So we're first going to check if they sent an email, and if they did, then we can add this object in here. If not, we'll just add an empty object. And wrap that whole line minus the comma in parentheses, and then do dot, dot, dot. So dot, dot, dot is a spread. And basically what it's saying is add everything within this object to this parent object. That might seem a little complicated for you right now if you haven't seen this before, but just take my word for it that essentially this is going to get added into this object, this op and object. And then we're just going to do the same thing with username. So I'm just going to duplicate this line and then copy username everywhere else. So the op and is essentially useless in this situation because there's only ever going to be one field we're checking on. Actually, no, that's not true. We could be checking both of them. So if they send both of them, that's great. They'll need to match, but that's to be expected anyway. So in this way, we can get the trainer from our database based on either the username or the email they sent in the body. And we're going to check because it's totally possible that that trainer doesn't exist. So we have to check if the trainer exists. If it doesn't, we'll say you're not authorized to do anything here because you don't exist. There was a problem logging in. Please check to make sure your email and password are correct. And try again. So you may ask, well, why don't we just tell them your user doesn't exist? The reason, you'll notice on a lot of websites, if your user doesn't exist or your password is wrong, you get the same error message. And that's not because they don't know what you did wrong. Usually they do. We know exactly what they did wrong. Their user doesn't exist. But you don't want to tell them that, because if they're a bad actor trying to hack into your API for whatever reason, get information on Pokemon, or maybe release other people's Pokemon, they're going to possibly be trying multiple usernames, multiple passwords, seeing which one exists. If they get a message back that says that one doesn't exist, they know, hey, I don't have to try different passwords with this one. I can just go to a different user. So we want to be kind of ambiguous about what the problem was in that situation. And then, yeah, we'll just return that. Make sure to return, that way it short circuits this function. It doesn't keep going. Okay, so if their trainer exists, we need to create an access token and a refresh token for them. So we'll first just set them to null. I'm using the let keyword here instead of const because we're going to be changing this. It's actually a variable, not a constant. Now let's do a try catch block because the next code is error prone. In our try block, we're going to check. So we're going to be comparing their password against the hash password. And so the way we do that, because we don't actually know their password in the database, we don't store that, we store the hash, is we're going to be comparing, we're going to say compare rectangle body password. So that's the password they sent us with the password hash we have stored in the database. And bcrypt will compare, it'll know what hash to use to check against, and it'll just check, it essentially just checks 2 hashes. So it hashes the password they sent us, and then it checks that hash against the hash that they have in the database. And if they're the same, then we know their password is correct. So we're checking, and if it's not if it doesn't match, then it's the wrong password. And we can send, we'll just copy this because we want the error message to be the exact same. We'll just send the same thing. There was a problem logging in. Check to make sure your email and password are correct and try again. Okay, then after this if statement, if they pass through here, that means their password was correct. So then we can set their access token to be wait. We're going to create a function for this. So let's just not do anything for a second. We're going to call this, so up at the very top of your file, after all your imports, we're going to create a function called generate access token. In fact, let's just call this generate token. We're going to put payload and options here. In this, we're going to say, let's delete these brackets. We can do this on one line. We're going to do promisify jot.sign, and then payload. We're going to pass in the payload. We're going to pass in, actually, you know what? Let's remove these options. I changed my mind. I'm going to make this generate access token again. So we're going to pass in payload. You're going to pass in the access token secret, which is in your .env file. And we're going to pass in some options. This is going to make it so that the access token expires in 30 minutes. And then let's duplicate this, and we'll do the same thing for the refresh token. But with the refresh token, we're going to just remove this options thing. We don't want the refresh token to expire. Otherwise, they won't be able to refresh their token after a certain while. Defeats the purpose. And that should be good. So we'll take generate access token down here. For me, it's line 38. So we're going to set our access token to generate access token. And the thing we're going to pass in is the trainer, the entire trainer object. And we'll set an await to that because we need to wait for it. It's an asynchronous function. And then let's just duplicate that, make this refresh token, and say generate refresh token. So there, those are the 2 tokens we've created. Now we'll need to create a salt. So just the same way we did with the register endpoint with bcrypt gen salt. And then we're going to hash our refresh token, and we're going to store that in the database in the tokens table. Again, we want to make sure it's hashed for security purposes. Now we'll save it. We'll save it with a trainer ID of trainer.id and a refresh token. Okay, so now that we have that, what we can do is outside, we'll catch the errors in a second, but what we'll do is we're first going to have to check, did it work? Is there an actual token here? If there is, perfect. But if there's not, we need to send a 500 error because we don't know what happened. Unfortunately, we could probably do some better programming here and figure out what actually happened in the creation of the access token and the refresh token. But for simplicity's sake, we're just going to tell the user there's a problem logging in, couldn't create an access token. And let's just make sure to return this. But if there was an access token, great. We can tell them everything worked. We're going to send some information to them that they're going to be using to authenticate. So first, we're going to tell them that their access token expires in 1800 seconds, 30 minutes. The next thing we're going to say is expires at, and we're going to do a new date. So we're going to just set a new date. So this is the current date and time. And then we're going to do set, oh, you know what? Let's do this. Expires at, make this let, this. I'm going to create a new variable for this. We're going to say expires at equals new date. We'll do expires at get time plus, we'll do 1800 is the number of minutes it expires in. Or that's the number of seconds. So we'll add 1, 2, 3 because that's how many milliseconds. So this is essentially going to be just a new date. We're going to say expires at that date. So what we're doing is we're saying get the current date time and add 30 minutes to it, and that's when their access token expires. That's just helpful for them to know exactly when it expires. And then we'll pass the refresh token and the access token, and they'll be able to use this to authenticate with any endpoints they need. And we will return this. Now, the last thing we need to do is just catch any errors. Honestly, with this one, we're just going to be doing a 500 error message. So we can copy and paste that 500 error message from down below and just add in the actual error object. And we should be good to go. So let's test it. Node app.js. Okay, everything's running as we expect it to. If you go over here, again, it's the same thing as the register endpoint. Just make sure to add a body. Make sure your body is raw JSON, and you can either do email or username. Actually, let's test both for now. And with password, make sure it's the same password that you used when you created your account. Go ahead and send that. And perfect. So you know it works if you get something like this. So we know it expires in 1800 seconds. This is the date time when it expires. And then here are our access token and our refresh token. And you'll want to save this somewhere. so you can copy and paste it. In fact, I'm just gonna keep this here because I'm not gonna try logging in again. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create a new user. Actually, I will log in again. I'm not gonna create a new user. I'm gonna use the email that I used to create my account and just make sure this works. We might get an error, but I think this should be fine. Yeah, okay. So there it is, access token, refresh token. You want to save both of these somewhere or just leave them here and don't change this. But we'll be using those in a couple videos when we actually add the authentication to our normal endpoints. So until then, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.